Conneaut City Council is now in session for February 28, 2022. Ms. O'Connell, roll call.
Council President Pro Tem Mr. Moiseo,
President.
Mr. Emery,
Here.
Mr. Goff,
Here.
Mrs. Ledford. Here. Mr. Prokowski,
Present.
City Manager Mr. Hockaday,
Here.
and Law Director Mr. Lewis.
Here. Okay, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then following the Pledge of Allegiance, please remain standing. Pastor Russ Ham from New Leaf will be doing the invocation. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God, we are grateful for those who have gone before us, who have sacrificed time and sweat to bring about a community and a town where we can raise families, watch out for our children, and enjoy the place that you've given us. We ask that you would help us to be good stewards of the land and the population, to receive guidance from you. Even when we might not know which direction to go, we trust that you have blessed this community thus far, and we know that you'll continue. I thank you for the service people, those who have cleaned up our streets, taking care of our trash, those who are in this room making decisions and taking risks for us, looking to a future beyond just the next 30 minutes or 30 days. We pray that you would help them to be good stewards of their time, that we might be appreciative of all that you give us, and that includes the leadership of those volunteers and paid staff that watch over our city. We thank you for the privilege of gathering in freedom. We are aware that there are those on this planet that don't have the freedom to govern the way we do. Let us never take for granted our government. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Ham.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, approval of the meeting minutes for February 14th, 2022. Is there a motion? Make a motion. Second.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford. Yes. Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes. Okay, the meeting minutes for February 14th, 2022 has passed. Special presentations this evening. I don't believe we have any, but we do have an awards presentation. Mr. Nick Phil, Employee of the Month. I don't believe he's present, but we want to go ahead and read the, thought we had one.
My apologies. Certificate of Achievement Employee of the Month. The Employee of the Month for February is Nick Phil. Nick is a member of the Water Distribution Department. Nick recently took it upon himself to study for and pass his Water Supply 2 license. Nick has also been very involved in our transition into the GIS system and has been the person most involved in our progress with backflow entries. Most recently, Nick has stepped up and made himself one of the better operators of the new valve maintenance trailer. Nick is always willing to learn something new and should be recognized for his efforts.
Okay. Congratulations to Nick, and thank you for all that you do.
Congratulations.
I don't think we have any citizens' comments this evening. Communications.
I have none this evening.
Anybody have communications to be read in the record? Okay, that moves on to reports of our administration. Mr. Hockaday.
President Pro
Just say
Tem.
thank you.
A mouthful.
I know.
I'm out of rhythm with that one.
Yeah.
So I do have a couple of updates. One, congratulations to the chamber and all the chamber awardees, including Mr. Gaw, who received his presentation from last year and was finally recognized for all his efforts, particularly those over at Malik Park. So it was a great evening for everyone. It was a tremendous turnout. It was actually really nice to see people's faces and see them in attendance in person. It's been a long time since we've been able to do that. So it was really nice. Glad everybody could be there, and congratulations to all those winners, specifically Mr. Chuck Guglielmo, who is Conneaut Citizen of the Year. So congratulations to all that excellence all the way around. A couple other things I really want to point out to you. We did have our CLYO meeting. This was kind of an emergency meeting. I'm sure many of you have seen the photos and pictures online. I can tell you, it's much worse in person than it is.
It is much worse in person.
It's absolutely devastating. It wasn't just flooding, it was the ice that was carried by the flood waters, and it flattened a lot of the fences. And then it also brought in just a tremendous amount of debris. There's kind of a twofold issue there. One, the ice is still there, and even though we've had many above freezing days, it will probably continue to be there for some time. The ground is now also thawing, and it's becoming very soft, so you can't really get any equipment out there to clean it up. So there's going to be a lot of hand labor involved in removing, in some places, waist deep or better debris from those fields. Not to mention the damage to the fences and other structures that they have there. So I did meet with the Asheville County Metro Parks, the Conneaut Area City School District, and the CLYO board members. They do have a cleanup day set up for this Saturday at 10 a.m. So if somebody would like to volunteer, participate in some of the cleanup efforts, it's probably going to be more than a one-time thing, just because of the amount and the volume and the conditions that are there today. So I have offered to assist, with our own resources. Understand that these ball fields are also the ball fields for the high school boys baseball team and girls softball team. So I see this as assistance, at least to another government entity in this case, not to mention it's a community park. So we're going to assist them in getting their driveway back in order this week, so they can at least accommodate some of those volunteers that will come in over the weekend. And I told our department heads if they would like to use equipment and they have employees that want to come in and volunteer, as we do with downtown cleanup and other things, that would be perfectly acceptable, so long as our improved employees are the only ones that would operate any of our equipment, just as we have with other cleanups. They do have a couple of significant contributions that I know have already been made, but there is going to be a significant financial repair bill that they're going to have to deal with. As such, I'm aware of two fundraisers. I know the Conneaut Dairy Queen this Thursday is doing the Blizzard of the Month. 100% of those proceeds go to the CLYO. And I believe the Rainbow is also doing that this Thursday as well. So I just put that out there as a general announcement and reminder. I believe they have a GoFundMe page, but they can also accept direct donations, as they are a 501c3 themselves. So if you don't want to pay the fees related to GoFundMe, I think you can make direct contributions. So, it's kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there's the immediate need of having to get this cleaned up and in order, and then kind of a reinvestment in the park to get it playable. And then I think there's also kind of a second long-term, more strategic lens of whether or not, ultimately those ball fields are relocated somewhere else. This isn't the first time they've flooded. This is obviously a very catastrophic flooding. But I think we've seen some pretty extreme weather events lately. Lake Erie hit an all-time peak, a couple of years ago. I mean, these things are becoming more common and more consistent. So, we not only have to build more resilient infrastructure, we have to realize that some of the weather events that we see are going to be more extreme and more frequent. So that in mind, we need to look and make sure that any investment or reinvestment is going to be a wise one. So we've had some of those conversations. One of the questions that's still kind of out there, and the reason why the Metro Parks was at the meeting to begin with, is the girls' softball field is closest to the river, and it has some substantial damage, and is the least accessible field in terms of getting any kind of mechanical equipment over there. So we're looking at the possibility that the Malik Park field would be restored, have some dugouts built, put an outfield fence in, amongst other things. Kind of an assessment as to whether that can be utilized for the softball field for this season only. So we can focus the efforts on the boys baseball diamond down there. which has the most significant amount of debris on it. But it is closer to the road and closer, more accessible than the softball diamond, which is behind it and closer to the river. So, at this point, it's really kind of work on it and assess. We're just looking at what's there. I've been down there 2 or 3 times now, looking at it. I spent some time with a couple of my staff members down there today. And it's a serious situation. Hopefully we are able to get these back to a playable condition so they can have little league as well as middle school and high school play. So they're going to do their best. I know everybody there is going to make their best effort, but really the conditions are going to control what happens more than anything. So, just bear with them. I understand CLYO is a group of volunteers. And I know the school district has, pledged their support to get the fields up and running, and, certainly the city as well. So it's a tragic situation. I hope everybody can support them in their own way. And we will continue to do our best to assist them as they move forward. I would tell everybody right now to expect the opening games for the season to either be relocated or in other areas, because they're close to 30 days away. And it's hard to imagine a scenario in which that's going to happen on that ball diamond. So I just want people to bear that in mind. And I would tell them for that information, in terms of high school play schedules, you need to get that directly from the school districts. I'm not going to say one way or another, but, I just want people to be in recognition of the actual state of the structures and fields. So. Sorry for that terrible news, but I think it's something that we all need to be aware of. And again, I would remind anybody, the Dairy Queen and Rainbow this Thursday are having their anything you buy, the proceeds are going to go to the CLYO. Route 20 Waterline Phase 2, as I mentioned here before the meeting, so I'm going to ask. We have our pre-construction meeting set for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. That is a jack and bore project. All the long lines have already been shoved pre-road construction. So this will just be on that north tree lawn area. And it is jack and bore. So there'll be a couple bore pits and it'll be pushed. And we expect about 10 days of total construction time on that. It should be fairly short and very minor in any kind of inconvenience. They might take a portion of that north lane, but traffic will be maintained in both directions at all times. Ask everybody just to be cognizant of all the workers that are going to be working both there west of Parish to Gore, and then additionally, I'd like to mention that the Dominion employees are working at the west end down by the Amboy Bridge. Just again, slow down, take your time. They're doing the best they can. They're making that crossing right now. Once they make that crossing, the construction control zone will shrink. It'll be less invasive, and then it'll move eastward down towards the Highland Apartments. It terminates near Dibble Road. So that is the full extent of their project. I expect that project to be concluded by the end of March. So they're going to move relatively quickly. The Buffalo Street Boring project, the last council meeting that we had not received the grant agreement. I received that grant agreement. I executed that grant agreement and returned it to the state of Ohio. So we can now start taking next steps. So once CT has final bid specs for us, that'll be coming before council for its approval to go out to bid and then proceed to the construction. The Route 20 sewer lining project, those bids have been received, and we have an ordinance before you tonight. Obviously, we won't be able to act on it tonight. We can't waive the 3 reading rule, but you can see that recommendation for award. Very happy, very pleased with the bids. We had multiple competitive bidders for this project, so that was good to see. And that too will be on Route 20 at various locations, basically Chestnut Street through the downtown area here. It is an in situ, so it is a lining process that incurs, there's no digging involved. They insert through the manholes. Any traffic accommodation should be relatively minor. And traffic will flow in both directions around that construction. So, but again, be mindful, there will be construction equipment located in normal driving lanes. And there will be traffic zones set up on either side. So just be cognizant of anybody working. It won't award at this meeting. Hopefully at one of the subsequent meetings, we'll be able to move it along here, and we expect it to be completed by May 1. So it should be another fairly fast project. The last thing that I'm going to touch on here is we have the demolition dollars that came out of the stimulus package that got directed straight to county land banks. So the Ashland County Land Bank was a recipient of about $500,000 in demolition funds. They have asked those communities that have demolitions that are ready to go and are ready to move and proceed to demolition. We have a number of them. Most of them are listed there on my report. Those have all been submitted. They did give us a sub-grant agreement, though we will not be handling any of the cash accounting on this. We will bid it, and then it'll be contracted directly by the Asheville County Land Bank and paid directly to the contractor. We'll be required to memorandaize those dollars across our books. So there are two things on your agenda tonight related to that. One is a fund creation. Even though it's a memorandized expense, we will have to show that. The second is the actual sub-grant agreement provided by the Asheville County Land Bank, which we'll be required to sign and return to them before proceeding with demolition. So those two items are on your agenda tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions about my report, and we'll go through the ordinances one by one.
Anyone have questions for the city manager?
I'll bring it up now. Norfolk Southern is going to be pulling rail off, and they've cut like 2 channels on both sides of the track. And what they'll do, they're going to lay rail from Conneaut to Ashtabula, brand new rail, and they're cutting these grooves, and then they'll slide the rail. They'll have a backhoe, dig it out, and they'll lay the rail in, put cold mix or something on top. They were supposed to get out today. I don't know if they did, but tomorrow probably they'll be in the town. So expect some delays. Use Broad Street.
So, I was just going to
And
say,
thank you for reminding me of that. I jumped over that. Yeah, so we do have, they did some cutting in the last week where they went through, and you may have seen a saw cutting crew. They were temporary closures of about 90 minutes. And they are going to be doing this on a rolling basis all the way from Conneaut through Ashtabula, where they're adding a dual track all the way through. So those are anticipated to be approximately week-long closures at any juncture. They do not have specific timings because I believe they noticed all 25 crossings at the same time. So once we see how fast they're moving, the eastern crossings aren't as bad. Some of them on our west are more problematic, such as Gore Road, where that impacts some businesses and business transit. So once I have more nailed down timelines on that, I can notify those businesses, but they're moving pretty slow, as you stated.
I don't know if they've contacted the schools. They might.
I did mention it to the schools, and they
Thank you.
did send a generic notice, and that was sent to the bus garage. But again, it's a generic notice of 25 crossings across 30 days. So it's hard to know when anything's going to be impacted specifically.
and I think they listed the detours, potential detours on the mapping for the different crossings. And Asheville County EMA has also put out a notice with all the crossings, affected crossings and detours, so on and so forth. But Jim's right. The question is, how long will the closures be? So,
Unfortunately, that's all the notice they're required to give us. So, we'll do our best to make sure everybody knows it's there and, how to work around it.
anybody have any other questions for Mr. Hockaday? All right, so moving on. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Moiseo. Everyone should have received a copy of my report via email. Anybody that did not receive it. I don't really have anything to add to that written report. If anyone has any questions about it, feel free to ask them. One thing I would point out, I don't know if all the council is aware of this yet, but a legislation was passed, signed by the governor, so that council can now meet remotely again, like you were able to during the beginning of the pandemic. So that, just be aware that that option is available to council again. If the need for it should arise, put it that way.
But it's only
I don't
till,
recommend it, but it is available again.
only till June 30th, correct?
Sorry, Terry?
Only till June 30th.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
I think they were late rolling that out because of the uptick back in the fall.
right.
Right.
Yeah, the numbers are going down now, fortunately, so, but it is an option.
Will that apply to boards and commissions as well?
Yes.
Is there any way we can get you to author a memo? Because we're gonna field more questions than, I'm able to answer. So if we could get just a generic synopsis of that legislation, so I can share it with ZBA and Planning Commission and some of the other
Sure.
commissions. I know our health commissioner asked about that as well.
Okay.
HB 51, I think it was, HB 51, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, House Bill 51.
Any questions for Mr. Lewis? Okay, moving on, reports of standing committees.
I just have an announcement that the Economic Development Committee will be meeting on March 15th at 9 a.m. That's March 15th at 9 a.m.
At 9 a.m. Okay,
Will that be here?
I'm sorry?
Here.
Mr.
Yes,
Prokopsky,
it'll be
here?
here. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Any committees? Any reports of our board liaisons?
I have a report this evening, Mr. Moiseo.
Okay.
The Cable Advisory Board met February 22nd at noon at the Conneaut Library. A couple of major things was big congratulations to President Chuck Guglielmo for winning Citizen of the Year. Well-deserved, and I was excited, and all his fellow board members were very excited and wished him congratulations. A lot of discussion was taking place about the new on-demand video that they have going on through Vimeo. It's VIMEO.com.
Vimeo.
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 Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Not Venmo. I'm
Yeah,
got
that's-
confused with, that's totally different.
That's totally different.
Totally different thing. But please go search out videos, anything you'd like to see. They're continuing to update their content, spread the word about that. Any entities out there that would like to add that link on their websites, please feel free to do so that we can spread the word on that. I would like to say there was a high school student in attendance. His name is Dylan Stewart. He's a high school student, is very interested in video technology, and I was excited, along with the other board members, excited to see the interest in a young student to get involved in the cable advisory boards. So that was great. They're continuing to promote their Facebook and following, tracking their followers and engagements and likes, and having people encourage people to share that information. They had the election of their 2022 officers. Chuck Guglielmo will remain president. Martha Sorohan will continue as secretary, and Lance Drew will continue to be the vice president. Let's see. I think that about does it. The next meeting, I'll go ahead and announce, is Wednesday at noon. It's March 23rd, and it also is at the Conneaut Public Library. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ledford.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Right, that brings us to our ordinances and resolutions on the table. So we have 4 still on the table: 9621, 9721, 9821, and 9921.
The planning commission sent that back to us.
I'm sorry?
The planning commission sent it back to us.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So we have to,
I didn't know when I would say that.
yeah, I think we maybe should discuss it at the next work session and try
Work
to
session. Okay.
make the adjustments. I think there were some language changes, some very basic language changes, and then move those forward. I think was the game plan. Okay, so next, bring us to our third reading ordinances and resolutions, which there are none. Our second reading ordinances and resolutions, there are none. And now our first reading ordinances and resolutions, we'll start with ordinance number 10-22. Mrs. O'Connell.
An ordinance to amend ordinance 8621 to strongly recommend persons entering Conneaut City Hall and remaining in common areas to wear facial coverings regardless of vaccination status and declaring an emergency.
Well, we all know what this is. Consistent with the courts are no longer going to mandate masks when entering the courtroom effective tomorrow. We were trying to synchronize our efforts here, but we won't be able to do that. So this is just a modification of that. I would strongly recommend that you take a look. Nichelle Blood from the Health Department sent out the updated CDC mask wearing guidance tonight. So you can take a look at that. We can also discuss this now during our work session on the 7th. And if we choose to have a special meeting after that, we can also further address it there. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions for Mr. Hockaday? If there are none, then I believe ordinance 10-22 would go to second reading. Correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Jerry.
Ordinance, if there are no questions, ordinance 10-22 would go to second reading.
Correct.
Okay. We'll move on to ordinance 11-22.
An ordinance to amend section 1323.01 definitions of the city of Conneaut codified ordinances and not declaring an emergency.
So the next two, 11-22 and 12-22. Mr. Lewis, would you like to talk about these? And they're both related to emergency abatement. Originally, I think we were going to throw these on the work session for next week, but both of these have to do with modifying some of the emergency abatement pieces.
Correct. Basically trying to give a little more teeth to these ordinances, to give the planning and zoning manager a little bit better leverage, if you will, to try and get some of these vacant houses that are being used, some of them are being full of homeless people that are, squatters and or drug users. We're trying to give a little more teeth to this, these two code provisions, just to help with the emergency abatement of these types of residences, to just mainly to be able to get people out of them more expeditiously than we have in the past. We've included the definition of a drug house into the definition of a public nuisance. And it's defined as any location, place, vehicle, structure, building, residence, or premises known by a law enforcement agency, not a neighbor, but a law enforcement agency, through their investigation and reporting, to be used unlawfully for storing, selling, buying, giving away, using, or permitting the use of illegal narcotics or other controlled substances. So what we've encountered in the city, again, is some of these vacant houses that are just people squatting in them and using them as places to A, live, and B, do drugs or sell drugs or combination thereof. So we're trying to get a little more teeth to this definition and have the ability to get folks out of these buildings, get them boarded up if they need to be boarded up, et cetera. So.
Mr. Lewis, was there, I think there was a previous ordinance where the property owner or somebody would be responsible for any cost of remediation.
Yes.
As an example, like a meth.
That's a clandestine drug lab ordinance, and that is still on the books. This is, use an example. I believe there was one over on Liberty Street. This would have been before Mr. Lewis was here, where there was a problematic house where the owner was occupying it and selling drugs out of it. And we went through a lengthy court process to do that. This would kind of eliminate some of that need where we say, look, there's either not an owner or this is simply a drug house as known by, we say it's condemned based on its usage as a drug house. And it gives kind of that vacation order, condemnation order to the planning and zoning manager. Much like some of that authority that is clandestine drug lab. So that's very similar. That authority is from my office to declare a clandestine drug lab. And then we order it vacated and then remediated. If they fail to remediate it, we can remediate it and assess the cost to it. So similar in nature, not the same.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Lewis or Mr. Hockaday on 11-22? So again, 11-22 would be moved to second reading. Brings us to 12-22.
And this is the same. This is just the language associated with the definitions. So
Read the caption. Ordinance to amend section 1323.05 emergency abatement of the city of Conneaut codified ordinances and not declaring an emergency.
Any questions on that ordinance 12-22? All right, 12-22 will be moved to a second reading. Which brings us to 13-22.
An ordinance authorizes the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with United Survey, Inc. for the Route 20 sewer lining project at a price not to exceed $512,690 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday.
okay, so this obviously kind of speaks for itself. Mr. Bidwell did select two of the alternates. So he selected alternate 1A and alternate B. He did not select alternate 1B. It is the lining of the mains and top hats for 71 of the laterals that we consider in need of that treatment, and then also lining of the manholes. The option that was not selected by Mr. Bidwell was the lining of the balance of another 170 some laterals, which was just, if we could do it financially, great, but it did not fit within our proposed budget. So we did not select that. So we're going to line the most critical ones as well as the manholes.
Any questions for Mr. Hockaday? Okay, hearing none, ordinance 13-22 would be moved to second reading. Brings us to ordinance 14-22.
An ordinance authorizes the city manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Ashtabula County Land Reutilization Corporation for removal and or demolition of unsafe, structurally defective, abandoned, deserted, or open and vacant buildings and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday.
I made previous reference to this in my report regarding the ARPA dollars that the land bank has received. This is the subgrant agreement to do that. A couple of things that you might note is we are going to be responsible for the bidding of those projects, any kind of pre-processing on it, which is not a big deal. It does allocate a limited portion of those funds, I think about $800 per structure for any administrative costs incurred by the city to do that per structure. And the balance of it will be direct payment from the Asheville County Land Bank to the contractor that performs those demolitions. And so far we have selected approximately 3 commercial structures, and then I believe there's about 7 residential structures that are currently prepped for that list. The standard is fairly high, and this is why it's important to, do your homework. And those commercial structures all have court orders for demolition on them by the city and have had them for a period of time. And we either have quitclaim deeds or court orders on any of the residential structures that are in need of demolition as well. So these are all prepped, ready to go, and we can show a clear legal process for that demolition. So now it's a matter of asbestos testing, bidding, and demolition of those structures. So very happy with the footwork by the law department and the planning department, getting all these ready to go so we can kind of be first in line. These funds are on a first come, first served basis within the county. And right now, my understanding is there is a bigger pot of money still left with the state of Ohio. So if Asheville County is able to use $500,000, there is a bigger pot that we can go after, but that will come with a 25% match. And I will be the first to tell you, it is my goal to use all $500,000. And then if we have to do it for 25% match, that's a steal. So we will continue to support the planning and zoning office and their endeavors to identify and demolish any houses that need that treatment.
So these were, in this particular ordinance, there are ARPA dollars we're talking about.
Yes,
correct?
and they came directly from the state to county land banks. So,
Okay,
which is
separate from the already dispersed ARPA funding to municipalities, counties, so on
No,
and so forth.
yeah. This is completely separate. It went straight from the state to counties with land banks. So I feel very fortunate that our county had the forethought to construct the land bank.
Questions for Mr. Hockaday? Okay, ordinance 14-22 is moved to second reading. That brings us to ordinance 15-22.
An ordinance to create Fund 262 Workforce Grant for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the Workforce Development Grant awarded to the City of Conneaut Health Department to support workforce activities.
This is for the health department and a grant that they've received. So it has to do with utilization of some personnel to come in and do a bunch of input and data entry, forced data entry that has backlogged and accumulated during kind of the height of this pandemic. But we will need to create a separate fund to track those expenditures from the health department.
Any questions on this particular ordinance for Mr. Hockaday? Okay, so ordinance 15-22 is moved to second reading. So ordinance 16-22, 17-22. So 17-22 is related to 16-22, and that's a budget amendment. Correct, so we'll cover 16-22.
An ordinance to create Fund 263 Land Bank Grant for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the Workforce Development Grant awarded to the City of Conneaut Health Department to support workforce activities.
I think everybody just caught the typo in that. So this is the land bank grant agreement. So we do have to create a memorandum line for any of those expenditure funds. So it should really truncate at the end of land bank for the purpose of receipts and disbursements related to the land bank grant as awarded to the City of Conneaut.
Any questions for ordinance 16-22? Okay, ordinance 16-22 will be moved to second reading. Brings us to ordinance 17-22.
An ordinance to amend the 2022 budget through appropriations and fund and interfund transfers attached here to a marked Exhibit A.
They speak for themselves.
Okay, so
It's so The biggest one is and I think it might be the only one, is actually the jail reimbursement fund. So we have a pay for stay line. This came up actually in the very first meeting of the year. What this is if somebody is incarcerated and they have cash on them, we hold that cash. If they're incarcerated overnight, they're charged $75 a day. And in the pay for stay program, which has been around for decades. And then we remit any of those funds to them at the end. It just so happens that one of the very first things we had happen this year, a gentleman had a sizable amount of cash on him and it fully depleted that line. John was able to handle it without us ultimately doing a budget amendment. We had a second one, and now it is definitely going to need a budget amendment. So typically we're reimbursing 75 cents, $3, $5. The first one was 3,000. The second one was 500. So those are sizable amounts that we could go 3 years and not use that much money. So it's just kind of happenstance, and it has to do with how much money they have in their pockets when we arrest them. So we will just need to amend the line.
Okay. Any questions on 17-22? If none, we will move on to ordinance 18-22.
An ordinance to authorize payment to the following contractors in the amount listed in section 1 below pursuant to section 5705.41D1 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency.
Okay, usually this is the naughty kids list. This is a department head that expended funds in greater than amounts of $3,000 without receiving prior authorization of a purchase order. So a couple were Joe DeBell in ordering salt. I don't think our budget was back open yet for him to attain a PO, so he gets kind of a pass there. That's not a big deal. Brian Bidwell did not get one opened for his electric bill in time, nor did for his EPA empty gas permit. So I swatted him on the hand, said don't do it again. But we owe the electric bill and we have to pay for our license for the wastewater plant. So it's kind of that beginning of the year, end of the year thing where there's see a little hiccups here and there. Either way, they do require council's approval for those expenditures, which are all reasonable expenditures. So.
Okay, any questions on 18-22? Okay, that will conclude all of our ordinances and resolutions for this evening. So we'll move on to unfinished old business. Does anybody have any unfinished business? Any miscellaneous business? Anybody would like to discuss? I will make an announcement that we will have a special meeting on March 7th, right after the work session. And that will be to consider time-sensitive legislation. So we want to get that out there. Also, I just wanted to bring up something. So I'm clear on this. I received a call on this. There was a concern about the drinking water due to the notice. You want to explain that was the late filing or it was
Yes.
received late? There was
Yes.
nothing
So
with the city.
this
so
was
we can-
during the Martin Luther King Day snowstorm that we had. We were required annually, year round, to take microcystin samples. Okay, that is algals in the lake. And we measure it on the raw side and we measure it on the finished side. I can tell you with Lake Erie being frozen over, there's no algae in bloom out on Lake Erie. The sample was taken, it was taken to UPS, it gets shipped to an outside lab. It did not arrive to that outside lab in time. I'm going to imagine, based on it coinciding with that giant snowstorm, that the truck was simply delayed in getting it to the lab. Therefore, the sample wasn't taken on time and it wasn't reported on time. And that's a violation. Regardless of it, in my opinion, having 0% risk to any drinking water or any patron here in the city of Conneaut, we are still required by our permit to notify anytime a lab specification isn't met, even though it's, in my opinion, a kind of ridiculous sample that we have to take an algae bloom sample in the middle of winter. Those are the rules, right? So we are required to notify that. And what I would tell people is this is a good thing. One, not good that we missed a sample. It's good that you see the transparency level that we have with our drinking water, that if there is something that doesn't meet standard, we are required and we do notify you of that, though I don't believe there's any risk to anybody, any drinking water. And this was a sample on the raw side, not on the finished side. So just want to point those couple things out. But if you know anything about Flint, Michigan, or any of that kind of stuff, it was because they weren't communicating to their customers what was going on with their drinking water plant. This is a requirement. We follow all rules. I feel bad that the sample didn't get there in time. And I know Rich is looking at what they could do differently in terms of protocol, but it is an outside lab and we have to rely on those third parties to deliver those samples for testing on time. But it's a good example of how well our system does work in terms of reporting. If something isn't done right, you will know about it.
So in the interest of transparency, then are we able to say basically what you said in a mailing with the water bill? So people, they'll see the notice, oh my gosh, there's a problem, and we're able to explain it.
We are required, they review our notice. So in terms of what it says, in terms of its statutory language, and we have to include both our permit number and everything else. You know, I would tell people if they ever receive a notice and don't understand what's in the notice, the contact information is right on the front. Call Rich Neubauer, call the water plant. They will happily explain anything that you want to know about our drinking water system and any notice that you would receive. So if people do have concerns, they can call my office, they can call the drinking water plant. I don't understand this notice and we're happy to explain it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other business, miscellaneous business? I'm going to need a motion to excuse Mr. Kozeski and Mr. Arcaro.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second it.
So Connell?
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kozeski and Mr. Arcaro have been excused. Motion for adjournment. Anything else?
So moved.
For a second, Mr. Emery? Second.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, Conneaut City Council for February 28, 2022.